I'm Penelope, 29 years old, standing in my Chicago apartment surrounded by half-packed boxes. The walls are covered with my graphic design awards. My phone lights up displaying a name I haven't seen in 8 months, Dad. Ironic timing. My parents' successful Boston elites didn't even notice I moved across the country 6 months ago. Now suddenly Dad's calling with demands and ultimatums about visiting. The audacity is almost comical. If you've ever felt invisible to the people who should care most about you, give this video a like and share where you're watching from. My story might help you realize you're not alone. Growing up in Brookline, one of Boston's wealthiest suburbs, should have been idyllic. Our 3-story colonial house, with its manicured lawn and luxury cars in the driveway, projected the perfect family image. But appearances can be deceiving. My father James was a prominent cardiovascular surgeon at Massachusetts General Hospital. My mother Martha was a corporate attorney at one of Boston's most prestigious law firms. Their careers were not just jobs, but all-consuming identities that left little room for being parents. I learned early that achievements were the currency of attention in our household, though even that had diminishing returns. In 2nd grade, I won first place in a statewide art competition. My drawing of our family holding hands under a rainbow earned me a blue ribbon and a small write up in the local paper. Mom, Dad, look what I won. I remember rushing into the kitchen, ribbon clutched in my small hand, newspaper clipping carefully folded in my pocket. My father glanced up from his medical journal. "That's nice, honey," he said before returning to his reading. My mother was on a conference call in her home office, door closed as usual. That evening, I taped the ribbon and newspaper clipping to the refrigerator myself. 2 weeks later, they were gone, replaced by a reminder about my father's hospital fundraiser. This pattern repeated throughout my childhood. Perfect report cards earned brief nods. Student council presidency warranted a distracted, good job between my parents' phone calls. My middle school graduation ceremony found me searching the audience for faces that never appeared. Dad had an emergency surgery. Mum had a deposition that couldn't be rescheduled. Christmas in our house was an unpredictable affair, often celebrated days before or after December 25th, depending on my parents' schedules. One year, we didn't celebrate until January 9th. I was 12, and by then the magic had long faded. "Better late than never," my mother said, as she handed me a gift card to a bookstore. My father gave me a check. "Put it toward college," he suggested, though college was still years away. Birthdays were similarly overlooked. My 16th birthday came and went without acknowledgement until 3 days later, when my father's secretary sent flowers on his behalf with a card that misspelled my name as Pinope. Despite the neglect, my artistic talents flourished. In 8th grade, I met Mrs. Fitzgerald, the art teacher, who would become my first real mentor. She noticed how I stayed after school, lingering in the art room, rather than rushing home. "You have a remarkable eye for colour, Penelope," she told me one afternoon as I worked on a watercolour. "Have you ever considered pursuing art professionally?" No one had ever asked about my future dreams before. My parents assumed I would follow practical career paths like theirs. Mrs. Fitzgerald was the first person who truly saw me, who recognized something special in me worth nurturing. Under her guidance, I developed a portfolio that would eventually help me secure a scholarship. She drove me to art exhibitions, introduced me to local artists, and provided the encouragement my parents never offered. The contrast between my home life and my friends' families became more apparent as I grew older. Sleeping over at my best friend Abigail's house was like visiting another dimension. Her parents asked questions about our day and actually listened to the answers. They attended her soccer games, cheering loudly from the sidelines. They remembered details about her friends, including me. "Penelope, I saw there's an art exhibition downtown this weekend. Would you like us to take you and Abby?" her mother once asked. The simple gesture of someone remembering my interests brought tears to my eyes that I quickly blinked away. At home, I developed coping mechanisms. I became fiercely independent, solving my own problems and making my own meals from an early age. I learned to forge my parents' signatures on permission slips. I became an expert at setting up carpools with friends' parents who pitied me. Abigail witnessed my parents' neglect firsthand and became my strongest ally. "Your parents suck," she declared after my 14th birthday passed without celebration. She had brought cupcakes to school and organized our friends to sing to me at lunch. "They're just busy. I defended automatically, though we both knew it was more than that. By high school, I had stopped expecting my parents to show up for anything. When my advanced art class held its gallery night, and my watercolor portrait was featured prominently, I didn't even mention it to them. Instead, Mrs. Fitzgerald Abigail and Abigail's parents came to support me. As senior year approached, I made a decision. I would attend art school in Boston. Not because I wanted to stay close to my parents, but because Massachusetts College of Art and Design offered an excellent program and a partial scholarship. More importantly, it was my ticket to independence. When I announced my acceptance to Mass Art at dinner one evening during my senior year, my father looked up from his plate with a frown. Art school. That's hardly practical, Penelope. Have you considered pre-med, or at least business? James, my mother interjected, let her have her hobby. She can always go to law school afterward. It's not a hobby, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. I'm majoring in graphic design. It's a growing field with excellent job prospects. My father sighed. Well, don't expect us to fund this experiment. Our money is set aside for a real education. True to his word, despite their combined 7-figure income, my parents refused to contribute to my education. The partial scholarship helped, but I still needed to work multiple jobs to make ends meet. I waited tables at a cafe near campus, worked as a teaching assistant in the design lab, and took freelance design jobs whenever I could find them. My freshman roommate Sophia quickly became a close friend and ally. Unlike me, she came from a warm, supportive family who practically adopted me from the moment we met. Your parents haven't called you once this semester, she asked incredulously during finals week. Her own parents called her every Sunday without fail. They're not big on phone calls. I explained the excuse, sounding hollow even to my ears. Sophia's parents sent care packages for both of us during exam periods. Her mother added handwritten notes addressed to me. We're so proud of you, Penelope. Keep up the great work. These small kindnesses from virtual strangers highlighted the void left by my own parents. Despite the financial strain, I thrived academically. My distinctive graphic design style began to draw attention from professors and peers alike. Professor Jackson, who taught advanced design principles, became another important mentor. Your work has a unique visual language, he told me after class one day. You communicate emotion through typography in a way I rarely see in undergraduates. His encouragement pushed me to enter student competitions and apply for prestigious internships. Meanwhile, my relationship with my parents grew increasingly distant. Holiday visits home were awkward affairs filled with surface-level conversations. So you're still doing that drawing thing? My father asked during winter break sophomore year. It's graphic design, Dad. I've told you about it several times. Right. Graphics for computers. After 3 years of studying the subject, he still couldn't remember the most basic details about my chosen career. My mother was no better. She missed my junior year exhibition because of a client dinner. When senior graduation approached, she got the date wrong despite my emails and reminders. I thought it was next weekend, she said when I called her, standing in my cap and gown among classmates surrounded by proud families. Your father and I have the benefit gala tonight. We can't possibly reschedule. They did make it to my actual graduation ceremony, arriving late and leaving early for a hospital board meeting. They sat stiffly during the event, checking their watches and phones. No photos were taken, no celebratory dinner followed. Through persistent networking and the strength of my portfolio, I secured an internship at Lightbox Design, a respected Boston firm. The internship turned into a job offer upon graduation. We're impressed with your vision and work ethic, my supervisor said during my performance review. We'd like to offer you a full-time position as a junior designer. I moved into my first apartment, a small studio in Cambridge I could barely afford. My parents didn't help me move or visit afterward. In fact, their contact dwindled to occasional text messages and obligatory holiday gatherings. As my career progressed, I stopped trying to impress them or seek their approval. Their validation was a well I had drawn from too many times only to find it dry. Instead, I focused on building my professional reputation and nurturing the relationships that actually sustained me. By the time I turned 28, I had established myself in Boston's design community. My work for several high-profile clients had been featured in industry publications. I had moved from junior designer to senior designer at Lightbox, and my career trajectory was pointing steadily upward. The turning point came when I won the New England Design Innovation Award for a campaign I created for a sustainable fashion brand. The recognition brought attention from larger agencies outside Boston, including Vertex Creative in Chicago, known for its cutting-edge work and impressive client roster. "We've had our eye on your portfolio for some time," the creative director said during our video interview. The position would be associate creative director overseeing a team of 5 designers. "It's a significant step up from your current role." The offer included a substantial salary increase and relocation assistance. Chicago's vibrant art scene and lower cost of living compared to Boston made the opportunity even more attractive. Still, it meant leaving the city I'd called home my entire life. I debated the decision for weeks, making pro and con lists and seeking advice from friends and mentors. Professor Jackson encouraged me to take the leap. "Boston will always be here," he said, "but opportunities like this don't come around often." Before accepting, I felt obligated to tell my parents about the potential move. I scheduled dinner at their house, something that happened perhaps twice a year at most. "I've been offered a position at a leading agency in Chicago," I announced as my mother served the salad she'd ordered from her favorite restaurant. "Associate creative director. It's a big opportunity." My father nodded vaguely while scrolling through emails on his phone. "Chicago's a decent medical community. Northwestern has a good program." "I'm not going for medical reasons, Dad. It's a career advancement in graphic design. The same career I'd been in for 6 years. "Oh, right." He didn't look up from his phone. My mother set down her fork. "Chicago is so far. Won't your little design jobs be harder to find there?" "Mom, I'd be an associate creative director at one of the top agencies in the country. It's not little design jobs." She said, clearly uninterested. "Did you hear the Sullivan's son just made partner at his law firm?" "He's 2 years younger than you." The conversation moved on to hospital politics and my mother's latest high-profile case. Neither of them asked a single follow-up question about my potential move. My father's phone rang halfway through dinner and he left the table to take the call, never returning. As I drove home that night, a painful realization crystallized they probably wouldn't even notice if I moved across the country. Our relationship existed in such a superficial realm that my physical presence made virtually no difference. 2 weeks later, I accepted the position at Vertex Creative. The preparations for moving were overwhelming but exciting. Sophia, who had remained in Boston after graduation, organized a going-away party with all our friends. Professor Jackson gave me a beautiful art book inscribed with an encouraging message. Mrs. Fitzgerald, now retired, called to wish me luck. Not one family member helped me pack up my apartment. Instead, Sophia Abigail and other friends formed a packing brigade, wrapping dishes in newspaper and disassembling furniture. We laughed and reminisced as my life was boxed up and labeled. "Text us when you stop each night," Sophia instructed as I prepared for the cross-country drive. "And call when you arrive safely." My departure from Boston felt symbolic, a physical manifestation of the emotional distance I'd long felt from my family. As the city skyline receded in my rearview mirror, I felt a mixture of excitement and liberation. The drive to Chicago took 3 days. I listened to audiobooks and podcasts, stopped at quirky roadside attractions, and documented the journey on social media. Each night, true to my promise, I checked in with friends. My parents never called to see if I had arrived safely. My new apartment in Chicago's Wicker Park neighborhood had exposed brick walls and large windows that flooded the space with light, perfect for my collection of art prints and the plants I'd carefully transported from Boston. Setting up my new home felt like turning a page to a fresh chapter. Vertex Creative welcomed me warmly. My team was talented and collaborative, and the creative director gave me considerable autonomy to implement my vision. Within weeks, I was leading client pitches and developing innovative campaigns that pushed creative boundaries. Chicago's art community proved just as vibrant as I'd hoped. I joined a local design collective that met monthly to share work and ideas. I made new friends who introduced me to the city's neighborhoods, museums, and food scene. Dating in a new city had its challenges, but also its rewards. I met Adrian, a UX designer at an industry mixer. We dated for a few months before amicably parting ways when our schedules and expectations didn't align. The relationship, though brief, helped me feel more connected to my new home. Weeks turned into months. I sent my parents my new address via email. No response. I mailed them a housewarming invitation with my new address clearly listed. No response, no visit. Thanksgiving came and went without an invitation home. I celebrated with new friends instead, contributing my grandmother's cranberry sauce recipe to a potluck dinner. As Christmas approached, I wondered if I would receive the obligatory invitation to the holiday gathering. None came. I called their house phone and left a message. No one returned my call. The most surprising thing wasn't their neglect, it was how little it hurt compared to years past. Chicago had given me not just professional opportunities, but personal perspective. The distance had helped me see my family dynamics more clearly and accept what I couldn't change. 6 months after my move, I realized a profound truth. I was happier without the constant disappointment of seeking my parents' approval. I had built a life filled with meaningful work and authentic relationships. For the first time, I felt truly independent, not just financially, but emotionally. The Saturday morning calm in my Chicago apartment was perfect. Sunlight streamed through the windows as I packed books into boxes, preparing to rearrange my growing home library. My coffee was still hot on the side table, jazz playing softly in the background. Then my phone rang, displaying a name I hadn't seen in 8 months, Dad. I stared at the screen, wondering if I should let it go to voicemail. Curiosity won out. "Hello," I answered cautiously. "Penelope, it's your father," he said, as if I wouldn't recognize his voice after 29 years. "No, how are you? No pleasantries. Just straight to business as always. Your grandmother is turning 80 next month. There's a party on the 15th at the country club. You need to be there." His tone wasn't requesting but commanding. I hadn't spoken to my grandmother, his mother, in over a year. While she had been kind during my childhood, our relationship had always been somewhat distant, largely due to my parents acting as gatekeepers. "I have work commitments," I said, though I hadn't checked my calendar. "I'd need to see if I can get away." "This isn't optional," my father's voice hardened. "It's a family obligation. Everyone will be there." "Dad, I'm in Chicago now. I've been here for 6 months. A pause. "Since when?" The question knocked the wind from me. "Since January. I sent you my new address. Multiple times." Another pause. "Well, that explains why your grandmother's invitation was returned to sender." "No." The realization was both stunning and unsurprising. They hadn't noticed I'd moved across the country. 6 months of no contact, and they never wondered why. "Is that why you're calling?" Because Grandma's invitation bounced back. I couldn't keep the hurt from my voice. "Don't be dramatic, Penelope. We've been busy. Your mother made partner, and I've been overseeing the new cardiac wing." He cleared his throat. "The point is, you need to be at this party." "I'll see if I can make it," I said non-committally. "Penelope." His voice took on an ominous tone I recognized from childhood. "You should know that your grandmother has been revisiting her will. The Cape Cod property is being divided among the grandchildren who remain in good family standing." The Cape Cod house had been the one bright spot in my childhood summers. While my parents attended medical conferences and networked with colleagues, I was often sent to stay with my grandmother for weeks at her beach house. Those rare moments of freedom and natural beauty had nurtured my artistic eye and provided respite from my lonely home life. "Are you threatening to have me disinherited?" I asked incredulously. "I'm simply stating facts. Family obligations matter. Your absence would be noted." Anger flared inside me. "Dad, do you realize this is the first time you've called me in 8 months? You didn't check if I arrived safely in Chicago. You didn't call on my birthday last month. You've shown zero interest in my life, and now you're trying to manipulate me with threats about Grandma's will." "We've always been there for you, Penelope," he said, his voice taking on that gaslighting tone I knew too well. "You're being unreasonable. We paid for your education." "No, you didn't," I shot back. "I worked 3 jobs and took out loans that I'm still paying off." "Well, we provided a roof over your head for 18 years. Most children appreciate their parents' sacrifices." Condone. The conversation deteriorated from there. I pointed out their consistent absence throughout my life. He deflected and minimized. When I mentioned specific instances of neglect, he accused me of exaggerating. When I asked why they never visited my apartment in Boston, let alone Chicago, he claimed they had respected my independence. "Enough excuses, Penelope," he finally snapped. "Will you be at the party or not?" "I need time to think about it," I said, my voice shaking. "Don't overthink it. Just be there. Your mother and I expect it." He hung up before I could respond. I sat in stunned silence, the phone still in my hand. Within minutes, it buzzed with a text from my mother. "Your father says you're being difficult about Grandma's party. Don't embarrass us." No hello, no how are you, just another demand. I called Sophia immediately, needing a rational perspective. "They didn't even know you moved," she asked, horrified, after I recounted the conversation. "That's beyond neglect, Pen. That's complete disinterest in your life. And now they're threatening me with disinheritance if I don't show up and play happy family. "Do you even want the beach house?" Sophia asked. "It's not about the property," I explained. "It's about the manipulation, the conditional love, the sudden interest only when they need something from me." By afternoon, I had received 3 more texts from extended family members, all urging me to do the right thing and attend the party. Clearly, my father had been making calls painting me as the ungrateful daughter who abandoned the family. I felt cornered and emotionally manipulated exactly as I had throughout my childhood. The familiar feelings of inadequacy and invisibility threatened to overwhelm me despite all the progress I'd made in building my independent life. The days following my father's call were a blur of emotional turmoil. I moved through my work responsibilities on autopilot, my mind constantly replaying not just the recent conversation, but a lifetime of similar moments. I remembered my 10th birthday when my parents scheduled an anniversary trip to Paris the same week. "We'll celebrate when we get back," my mother had promised. They returned 2 weeks later with a small Eiffel Tower keychain and no mention of my missed birthday. I recalled my high school art show where my watercolor self-portrait won Best in Show. Mrs. Fitzgerald took photos of me with my award because no family members attended. When I brought the ribbon home, my father had asked, "Is this for that drawing thing you do?" The college acceptances that went unacknowledged. The graduation they attended but didn't really witness. The first apartment they never visited. The awards they never recognized. Each memory formed a mosaic of absence and indifference that I could no longer dismiss as normal family dynamics. I needed external validation that my experiences weren't exaggerated, so I called Abigail, my oldest friend, who had witnessed my parents' neglect firsthand throughout our childhood. "Remember when your mum forgot to pick us up after that middle school dance?" Abigail said. "We waited for 2 hours in the cold before my mum realized something was wrong and came to get us. Your mum never even apologized. Did I make it all up, Abby? Was I an oversensitive child who demanded too much attention? The questions had haunted me for years." "Absolutely not," Abigail said firmly. "Your parents were absent in ways that went beyond being busy professionals. My parents were both doctors and they still made it to my soccer games. Your parents chose not to be present. That's on them, not you." Her confirmation released something in me. That night, I opened my laptop and began writing an email to my parents, pouring out decades of hurt and neglect. I documented specific instances, the missed birthdays, the forgotten achievements, the empty promises. I explained how their emotional absence had affected my self-worth and my ability to form relationships. I detailed the pain of realizing they hadn't even noticed I'd moved to another state. The email ran to several pages. Writing it was cathartic, each paragraph lifting a weight I'd carried since childhood. But as my finger hovered over the send button, I hesitated. A lifetime of experience told me they would dismiss my feelings, deny my experiences, or twist my words to make me the villain in their narrative. They wouldn't change. No email, no matter how heartfelt or specific, would suddenly transform them into the attentive, loving parents I had always craved. I saved the email to my drafts folder and made a different decision. I would fly to Boston and confront them in person, not with accusations, but with boundaries. I would attend my grandmother's party on my terms, not theirs. I booked a flight for the following weekend and scheduled an emergency session with Dr. Winters, the therapist I had started seeing shortly after moving to Chicago. "I'm proud of you for deciding to address this directly," Dr. Winters said during our session. "But let's prepare for various scenarios. What will you do if they dismiss your feelings again?" We role-played different approaches. We practiced phrases like, "That was my experience, even if it wasn't your intention," and "I'm not asking you to agree, just to listen." We discussed what healthy boundaries would look like moving forward. "Remember," Dr. Winters said as our session concluded, "you can't control their response. You can only control your own actions and reactions." The flight to Boston felt like traveling backward in time. As the plane descended over the familiar coastline, anxiety tightened my chest. I rented a car at the airport and drove straight to my parents' house, not giving myself time to reconsider. Their home looked exactly the same, imposing colonial architecture, perfect landscaping, luxury cars in the driveway. I rang the doorbell, heart pounding. My mother answered her surprise, quickly masked by a practiced social smile. "Penelope, we weren't expecting you until the party next week." "I thought we should talk before then," I said, stepping past her into the foyer. My father emerged from his home office, reading glasses perched on his nose. "Penelope, what's this about?" We moved to the formal living room, a space rarely used except for entertaining guests. I sat on the edge of the sofa. They took the matching armchairs opposite me. The physical distance between us perfectly symbolized our emotional relationship. I wanted to discuss your call, I began, and the larger issue of our relationship. There's nothing to discuss, my father said dismissively. You're coming to the party, end of story. That's not how this works, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. I'm an adult who makes her own decisions. I'm not a child you can command. While you're part of this family, he began. Have I been part of this family? I interrupted. Really, because from where I stand, I've been an afterthought for most of my life. My mother's posture stiffened. That's ridiculous. We've given you everything. Except your time, your attention, your interest in who I am as a person. We had demanding careers, my father said. We were providing for your future. I needed parents more than I needed providers, I countered. Do you realize you didn't even know I moved to Chicago 6 months ago? What kind of parents don't notice their child has moved across the country? My mother waved a dismissive hand. You've always been independent. We assumed you were busy with your little design job. I'm an associate creative director at one of the top agencies in the country, I said. But you wouldn't know that because you've never asked. The conversation deteriorated quickly. My mother grew cold and defensive, my father increasingly angry. When I mentioned specific examples of their neglect, they accused me of being overly sensitive. When I explained how their absence had affected me, they claimed I was being manipulative. I don't know why you're dredging up ancient history, my father finally said. This emotional display is unnecessary and frankly embarrassing. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity what I should have recognized years ago. They were incapable of seeing me. Not because I was unworthy of being seen, but because they were unwilling or unable to look beyond themselves. Tears filled my eyes, not from hurt but from a strange sense of release. I'm going to Grandma's party because I care about her, not because of your threats or manipulation. And after that, we need to establish new boundaries for our relationship. Boundaries? My mother scoffed. What does that even mean? It means I'm done trying to earn love that should have been freely given, I said, rising to my feet. I'm done accepting crumbs of attention and pretending it's enough. I walked out of their house, feeling both shattered and strangely liberated. In my hotel room that night, I cried for the little girl who had tried so hard to be noticed. I cried for the teenager who had given up trying. I cried for the young woman who had moved across the country without a goodbye. And then eventually, I stopped crying, because for the first time, I fully understood that their neglect reflected their limitations, not my worth. I woke the next morning with unexpected clarity and purpose. The confrontation with my parents, while painful, had been necessary. It hadn't changed them, but it had changed something fundamental within me. I was done seeking their approval or mourning its absence. I decided to attend my grandmother's birthday celebration, but on my terms. I would honor our relationship, complicated as it was, without pretending that my family dynamics were healthy. The party wasn't for another week, which gave me time to prepare. I spent the day shopping in downtown Boston looking for the perfect outfit. Not something that would please my parents or blend in with the country club aesthetic, but something that represented my authentic self. I found a striking emerald green dress that complemented my artistic sensibility while still being appropriate for the occasion. It was confident without being confrontational, exactly the message I wanted to convey. I also reached out to my grandmother directly, something I had rarely done in the past, since communication usually went through my parents. Grandma, it's Penelope, I said when she answered her phone. I'm in town for your birthday celebration and wondering if we could meet beforehand. Just the two of us. Her surprise was evident in her voice. Well, that would be lovely, dear. Would tomorrow afternoon work? We could have tea at my house. The next day, I drove to her home in the affluent suburb of Wellesley, a property I had visited many times as a child, but always with my parents present. The elegant colonial with its wraparound porch and carefully tended gardens looked exactly as I remembered. My grandmother greeted me at the door, her posture still remarkably straight, despite her advancing years. Her silver hair was perfectly coiffed, her outfit tailored and tasteful. She embraced me briefly before leading me to her sunroom, where tea was already arranged. You look well, Penelope, she said, as she poured Darjeeling into delicate china cups. Chicago must agree with you. I was startled. You knew I moved to Chicago. She added a teaspoon of sugar to her cup. Of course. I read the announcement in Design Quarterly about your new position at Vertex Creative. Quite impressive. My parents had no idea where I lived or what I did professionally, but my 80-year-old grandmother had read an industry publication announcement. I'm surprised, I admitted. I didn't think anyone in the family kept track of my career. Something shifted in her expression, a softening around the eyes. I've always followed your progress, Penelope, perhaps not as openly as I should have. We sipped our tea in silence for a moment before she continued. I owe you an apology, she said, setting down her cup. I was aware of your parents' shortcomings in raising you. I saw how they prioritized their careers over your well-being. I should have intervened more directly. Her candor caught me off guard. Why didn't you? She sighed. Your father, my son, has always been stubborn and resistant to criticism. When you were young, I tried to speak to him about his parenting. He threatened to cut off my access to you entirely. Her hands trembled slightly. I made the coward's choice, thinking limited access to your life was better than none. I'm not certain I was right. This revelation shifted my understanding of my family's dynamics. I always thought you didn't notice. I noticed, dear. Those summers you spent with me at the Cape House were my attempt to give you some semblance of normalcy and care. It wasn't enough, I know. We talked for over 2 hours, filling in gaps in each other's understanding of our shared history. I learned that she had attended several of my art shows in college, sitting quietly in the back without approaching me, afraid that my parents would disapprove of her independent relationship with me. She had followed my career through industry publications and social media, proud of my achievements, but uncertain of her place in my life. About the Cape House, I ventured eventually. Dad implied that my inheritance depends on attending your party. Her expression hardened. James had no right to say that. The Cape property will be divided equally among my grandchildren regardless of their attendance at social functions. Your father may control many things, but my will isn't one of them. As our visit concluded, we embraced more warmly than we ever had before. I'd like us to have a real relationship going forward, I told her, without my parents as intermediaries. I'd like that very much, she replied, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I arrived at the country club on the evening of the party feeling centered and prepared. The grand ballroom was decorated with elaborate floral arrangements and twinkling lights. At least 100 guests mingled, most of them unknown to me, despite our supposed family connection. My parents stood near the entrance, greeting guests with practiced charm. Their smiles froze when they spotted me. My mother's eyes darted to my dress, clearly not the conservative outfit she would have preferred. My father nodded stiffly, the barest acknowledgement of my presence. I bypassed them entirely, moving directly to my grandmother, who sat in an ornate chair near the center of the room. Her face brightened when she saw me. "Penelope, you look beautiful," she said as I kissed her cheek. "Thank you for coming." "I wouldn't miss it," I replied, and meant it. Throughout the evening, I navigated the complex social dynamics with newfound confidence. I chatted with relatives I barely knew, some of whom expressed surprise at my success in Chicago. "We had no idea you were so accomplished," my father's cousin remarked. "James never mentioned your promotion." "He might not be aware of it," I said simply, watching understanding dawn in her eyes. My parents maintained their distance, clearly uncomfortable with my presence, yet unwilling to create a scene. They had always prioritized appearances above all else. Midway through the celebration, my grandmother requested that family members share memories or wishes. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins stood to offer polite anecdotes. When my turn came, I approached the microphone with steady steps. "Grandma," I began, "my clearest childhood memories are of summers at your Cape House. While others recall your perfect blueberry pies or your garden, I remember how you taught me to really see the world through an artist's eyes. You showed me how light changes color throughout the day, how shadows create depth, how patterns in nature inspire human creativity. Those lessons shaped my career and my perspective on beauty. Thank you for seeing potential in me and nurturing it even in small ways." Hey. The subtle acknowledgement of what had been missing in my upbringing wasn't lost on those who knew our family dynamics. My grandmother's eyes glistened. My mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat. My father stared stonily ahead. After my speech, several relatives approached me privately, some sharing similar experiences with my parents, or expressing admiration for my independence. I discovered cousins who had also felt marginalized within the family hierarchy, creating connections I'd never known were possible. "Your father was the same way with my mum," said my father's sister, an aunt I barely knew. "Some people aren't equipped for emotional intimacy. It's not your fault." I left the party early on my terms, stopping to embrace my grandmother one last time. "I'll call you next week," I promised. We have decades to catch up on. As I walked to my rental car, I felt my father's presence behind me. That was quite a performance, he said coldly. I turned to face him. It wasn't a performance, Dad. It was honesty. You might try it sometime. I drove away without looking back, knowing something fundamental had shifted. I had faced my deepest childhood wounds and survived. I had spoken my truth without seeking approval. I had reclaimed my place in the family on my own terms. The next morning, I called my grandmother to thank her again for our time together. I hope we can visit more often, I said. Maybe I could come to the Cape House this summer. I'd like that very much, Penelope, she replied warmly. It's never too late to build the relationship we both deserved all along. I boarded my flight back to Chicago feeling lighter than I had in years, carrying not just painful memories, but new possibilities and unexpected connections. Returning to Chicago after the emotional intensity of Boston felt like stepping into fresh air after being underwater. My apartment, with its exposed brick walls covered in art and windows filled with morning light, welcomed me home. This space, created entirely on my terms, represented the life I had built for myself, despite not because of my upbringing. The week following my return, I channeled my emotional experience into my art. After work hours, I began a personal series exploring themes of absence, visibility, and self-definition. Using mixed media and digital techniques, I created visual representations of the empty spaces in my childhood and how I had filled them with my own light. The therapeutic process of creating this work led to an unexpected opportunity when my design collective organized an exhibition featuring members' personal projects. The gallery owner, impressed by the emotional resonance of my series, offered me a featured wall in the upcoming show. These pieces speak to universal experiences of being unseen, she said during the installation. They'll resonate with many people. She was right. At the opening, visitors lingered longest in front of my work, many sharing their own stories of family disconnection and the journey towards self-acceptance. What had begun as personal catharsis became a point of connection with others who had walked similar paths. Meanwhile, I needed to address the future of my relationship with my parents. After careful consideration and another session with Dr. Winters, I composed a letter outlining clear boundaries moving forward. Dear Mum and Dad, I wrote, our recent interactions have made it clear that we need to establish a new framework for our relationship. I am not cutting ties, but I am setting conditions for continued contact. First, I require acknowledgement of the past neglect I experienced. I don't need detailed apologies for every missed event, but a genuine recognition that your absence impacted me deeply. Second, any future relationship must include mutual respect and interest. This means asking about my life and listening to my answers. It means remembering basic details about my career and respecting my choices even when they differ from your preferences. Third, manipulation through financial threats or family pressure is unacceptable and will result in my immediate withdrawal from the interaction. I am open to building a healthier relationship if you are willing to meet these conditions. The choice is yours. I mailed the letter rather than sending it electronically, giving it the weight and formality the message deserved. Their response came 2 weeks later, predictably mixed. My father sent a terse email. Your conditions are unreasonable. We did the best we could as parents while managing demanding careers. When you have your own children, perhaps you'll understand the sacrifices we made. My mother called her approach more conciliatory, though still defensive. We never intended to make you feel unimportant, Penelope, she said. Perhaps we could try family counselling. Though skeptical, I agreed to a video session with a family therapist. It went about as expected. My father dominated the conversation, my mother deferred to him, and the therapist struggled to create space for authentic dialogue. We scheduled a follow-up session, but my father cancelled at the last minute due to a hospital emergency. Some patterns were too deeply ingrained to change quickly, if at all. While my parents adjusted to our new dynamics, my relationship with my grandmother flourished. We spoke weekly by phone, exchanging emails and photos between calls. She visited Chicago that spring, and I showed her my favorite museums and neighborhoods. She shared family stories I'd never heard, filling in blank spaces in my understanding of where I came from. Your grandfather was an artist too, you know, she told me over dinner at a riverside restaurant. He painted landscapes. Your father never had any interest in his work. I never knew that, I said, wondering what other connections had been lost to my parents' selective storytelling. There's much you don't know about your family, she said, patting my hand. But we have time to change that. My professional life continued to thrive. At Vertex Creative, I led a team that won a major account with a national retailer, developing a campaign that increased their market share significantly. My personal artwork gained attention in Chicago's art community, leading to commissions and gallery interest. My social connections deepened as well. The friendships I had formed in Chicago grew more meaningful with time and shared experiences. I organized a monthly dinner gathering that became an important touchstone in my life and the lives of my friends. I also began dating again more intentionally than before. Gabriel, a curator at a contemporary art museum, entered my life 6 months after my confrontation with my parents. Unlike previous relationships where I had often settled for less attention than I deserved, I was clear about my needs and boundaries from the beginning. My family history has made me wary of emotional unavailability, I told him on our 3rd date. I need consistency and clear communication. That seems perfectly reasonable, he replied. We all have histories that shape what we need from partners. His response, simple yet validating, signaled the healthier dynamic I now required in all my relationships. My therapy with Dr. Winters continued, focusing less on past wounds and more on building the future I wanted. We worked on reframing my childhood experiences, not just as sources of pain, but as the foundation for my strengths. Your self-reliance, empathy, and resilience didn't develop despite your upbringing, but because of how you responded to it, she pointed out. You've transformed your pain into something valuable. This perspective helped me approach my history with more compassion for myself and eventually for my limited parents. Their emotional absence had created wounds, certainly, but my response to that absence had forged qualities I now valued in myself. Inspired by my own healing journey, I organized a support group for adult children of emotionally absent parents. Meeting monthly in a community center near my apartment, we shared experiences and coping strategies. The group quickly became an important resource for its members, many of whom had never found spaces where their specific type of childhood neglect was understood and validated. I spent decades thinking I was too needy or too sensitive, one woman shared. Hearing your stories helps me understand that the problem wasn't me. As months passed, my relationship with my parents settled into a new pattern. We communicated sporadically with clear limits. I no longer expected the emotional connection I had craved as a child, accepting that they could only offer what they were capable of giving. This acceptance paradoxically freed me from the perpetual disappointment that had characterized our relationship for so long. My mother made small efforts to connect, sending occasional emails asking about my work. My father remained largely unchanged, though he had stopped making financial threats or demands. I visited Boston twice more that year, staying with my grandmother rather than my parents, seeing them only for brief, structured interactions. The Cape House became my regular summer retreat, a place to reconnect with the few positive memories of my childhood and create new ones with my grandmother and occasionally the extended family members, with whom I had forged genuine connections. Looking back on the year since my father's manipulative phone call, I recognized how far I had come. The neglected child who had desperately sought validation had grown into a woman who understood her own worth independent of parental approval. The painful confrontation had been necessary to break patterns established decades earlier. I no longer needed my parents to see me clearly. I had learned to see myself, to value my own experiences and perspectives without external validation. More importantly, I had surrounded myself with people who saw me authentically and loved me for exactly who I was. For anyone watching who has felt invisible in their own family, know that your experiences are valid even when they're denied. Creating boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for healing. Finding your voice after years of silence takes courage, but that courage changes everything. Have you ever had to establish boundaries with family members who couldn't see your worth? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might help someone else find the strength to value themselves even when others don't. And if you found this helpful, please subscribe and share with someone who might need to hear that they deserve to be seen. Thank you for listening to my journey from invisibility to living fully in the light of my own creation.